Welcome to the 76 Capital Leadership Series. My name is Wayne Kimmel, Managing Director of 76 Capital, as well as the host of our 76 Capital Leadership Series. Really excited to bring on a great guest today. His name is Steve Herz. He's the president of the Montag Group. Can't wait to get involved with him and start talking to him about his book, Don't Take Yes for an Answer. And you can see I got a lot of questions and tabs on the side to talk with him about his book today. So we're excited about that. But as many of you know, this is just such an exciting thing for us to do at 76 Capital with our leadership series, where we get this opportunity to sit down and talk with entrepreneurs, executives, and athletes who are doing the next thing in sports. And that's what we're all about at 76 Capital. We want to connect with you, the entrepreneur who's doing something incredible. We want to make sure that we get to know and spend time with the executives who are really thinking about the next thing in sports. And of course, all the athletes that are just thinking about this from a business perspective and also how they can influence and move brands and move companies forward. This is just such an incredible time in the sports industry. All the new emerging things that are happening with sports betting, with esports, in the media industry, and of course around social responsibility as well. So we want to touch on all these things. We're going to touch on all these things on our show today. We have James back at the station at James Santor. Follow him. James is making sure all the controls and everything's going right and back at the station. And you can follow me at Wayne Kimmel on Twitter, as well as all across the internet, and also follow 76 Capital. All the things that we do, all the companies we've invested in, all the great entrepreneurs that we are backing that are doing the next thing in the industry. You'll find out all of our things across all the different social media networks, whether that's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. Follow us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as subscribe to our podcast, where you can get all of our great leadership series shows. We have incredible guests. We're so lucky and fortunate to have so many people who want to come on our show and tell their story and tell the story about what they're all about, what they're trying to go do, and how they're truly making the sports industry better, and of course making the world a better place. So let's get right to it. Let's bring on Steve Hurst. Steve is the CEO, or he's the president of the Montag Group. He's a talent agent. He's the author of Don't Take Yes for an Answer, Using Authority, Warmth, and Energy to Get Exceptional Results. I mean, this is awesome. Steve, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Wayne. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. I'm excited to have this conversation. I just love, this authority, warmth, energy. I mean, look, it's something that's so important to, what we do at 76 Capital. And we talk about, getting behind entrepreneurs who are passionate, who are smart, who are nice, and who want to change the world. A lot of those messages are intertwined throughout your book, and I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You get the award for most notes taken on my book of anybody who's read it. So there you go.
Well, we'll get into that. But one of the things that we do, here at 76 Capital is and at our leadership series is we want to go behind the story, right? I mean, you're an author, you're a talent agent, you're a lawyer. We want to hear the backstory. So let's kind of go back to the beginning and Steve Herz as a kid. Where did you grow up? And, were you always into sports? Was that something that happened later in life, or just love to hear your story?
Yeah, I mean, I think my story is probably very similar to a lot of other people in our business. The failed, frustrated athlete. I was there are 4 kids in my family. I'm the youngest boy of the 4, the third in line. I have a younger sister, and having 2 older brothers, trying to play sports with them, 3 and 4 years older. At 8, it's hard to compete with the 11 and 12-year-olds, et cetera. And still loved it and wanted to play, and then that continued my whole life. But I wasn't fast enough, big enough, or strong enough to really ever do anything legitimate. So when I got into high school, I decided to become a sports writer. I thought that was kind of the best outlet for me, and then ended up as the editor of my school newspaper. I wrote a local sports column in Long Island for the South Shore Record, graduated from Hewlett High School. And then when I graduated, I thought my life would be as a sports writer. That was kind of the preordained path, I thought. So I went off and went to the University of Michigan, where I started as a sports writer for the Michigan Daily and worked with a guy a year younger than me who became a friend named Adam Schefter. And about a year or 2 later, I just decided after my sophomore year that this is not what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I was at a Boston Celtics Detroit Pistons playoff game in 1985 in the locker room, interviewing Bill Laimbeer and Isaiah Thomas, and just kind of took a look around and said, this is really not how I want to spend the rest of my life. I saw what the end game was, 20, 30 years later, if I was lucky enough to even get back to that point. And it just wasn't what I wanted to do. So I ended up going to law school at Vanderbilt. And then I just kind of, again, had this kind of midlife crisis at the age of 24 after working for a big law firm. This is in the book, as you know. The managing partner of the firm pulled me aside at the end of the summer and said, look, I don't think you're cut out to be a lawyer. I think this is the wrong field for you. This is really not where your best skills lie. But because he was a really good guy and he gave me the confidence to know that I did have other abilities, he said, go start a business, get into sales, do something else. And I did. I ended up quitting the law and ended up, trying to get my way into the talent business. Was lucky enough to get a job with a company called Athletes and Artists all the way back in 1992 with a guy named Art Kaminsky, who, for people that are old enough, he was a pretty legendary figure in the space. And Wayne, I didn't even know back in 1992 that sportscasters or newscasters had agents. I didn't even know that was a field that existed. But when I got that job, it really introduced me to the field. And that's what I've done for mostly the last 28 years is be an agent in that space.
Well, it's an incredible story. And you know what? I'm smiling because it reminds me so much of my own story, at the University of Maryland, broadcasting games. And I'm there with all the top guys who are, you're so fortunate, right? As you said, you were in the locker room with the Pistons at the time, doing, one of the things I'll never forget is sitting there with Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon. At the time, they were at the Washington Post. They were just writers. And they said to me, so what are you doing next year, kid? And it was my senior year, and they figured I was going to go somewhere and go be a newspaper reporter or try to get into the, broadcasting somewhere. And I said, no, I'm going to law school. They're like, oh, that's the smartest thing that you can do. And look, those guys and what they've done at PTI and ESPN is amazing. And I tell the story in my own book about this. But what's crazy is that I had this similar kind of feel like this is not going to turn into something, right? But here we are today.
Yeah, I guess we're lucky. So many things, like if you look back in hindsight, it all makes sense. But when you're going through it, it's a lot of anxiety in the moment. Am I going to really make it in this field?
Absolutely. And, you also, I'd love to also ask you, so you talked about being at the University of Michigan, and your friend, Adam Schefter, you worked with him at the school newspaper. Was he getting scoops back then?
I don't really think he was getting scoops as a freshman at Michigan, but I do think, and I've stayed in touch with Adam. He was a client of mine for a while after when I started my agency. And I think he always had this dogged determination. The guy has a work ethic second to none, and he's very passionate. And one thing I learned about Adam Schefter later on, I went to his apartment once. He would insist, Gideon Cohen, who from our company, Adam would insist that we would stay with him when we go out to Denver for work. And he had this little framed thing on his door, on his wall, about his grandfather who ran these 99-cent stores, like dollar store. And it's just like, the guy made his living $1 at a time. And I think that's kind of Adam's personality. He makes his living one tweet, one story at a time. He just grinds it out. And it just shows you how these skills are very transferable in life. That mindset of just continuing to grind every single day.
Yeah, that's so true. And we're so excited to have you, Steve, on our 76 Capital Leadership Series. We have Steve Herz. He's a talent agent. He's the president of the Montag Group and the author of Don't Take Yes for an Answer, Using Authority, Warmth, Energy to Get Exceptional Results. So, Steve, getting back into our conversation here and kind of where we were in the timeline, you just gotten into the talent business, and then you went and left to start your own agency. Is that what happened next?
Yeah. So what happened was in 92, I get this job with Athletes and Artists, working with Art Kaminsky and his company. And I stayed there for about 3 years. And, I love Art. He's passed away since then, obviously, but, or not obviously, but he has. And he was a great guy, brilliant man. But I just didn't feel like my values and his values in terms of how I would run a business were consistent. And I just decided, you know what, if I think I know better or I want to do it differently, the only choice was to go start your own business. So I did that in 96. And I started If Management on my 30th birthday in 1996. And right before I had done that, I had been working with another guy, a partner that I had met through this crazy, literally on an elevator, as you know. And his guy name was Alfred Geller. And that guy really changed my life because what he taught me in the time that we worked together, which was about 8 months, it was really about how to evaluate talent. I didn't know anything about how to evaluate talent. That wasn't really the focus at Athletes and Artists. It was much more of a transactional agent relationship, get the guy a job kind of thing. How much money could you get, which is all good. But there was a step before that. How do you evaluate who you're even going to sign? How do you help the client get better? What are the elements to making them better? And that was something that was really, really interesting to me. And that probably has had more influence and impact on how I've gone about my job those 8 months than anything else in my entire life.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. So then when you started your own agency, how did you start it? What were some of the things that did you have clients? Did you go out and were you out prospecting? How did you do it?
Well, it's a great question. So the answer is no. I had this partnership with Alfred Geller for those 8 months, and I went to him and I said, Alfred, I can't make a living making half of what I'm bringing in for the two of us. He had a whole other business that he was doing really well with, and so I said, can I take the 6 clients with me? And he said yes. And they weren't exactly big names at the time. It was Dave Revson in Quad City, Iowa, Lionel Bienvenu, who was in New Orleans at the time, and a guy named Chuck Garfine who was in Traverse City, Michigan. The entire revenue of the company was probably, I don't know, $50,000 or something. And so I got an office down on Wall Street working out of my brother's law firm. They were kind enough to give me an office at a cheap deal. And yeah, I just started, telling everybody I knew, even competitors, hey, I'm starting my own agency. And there was this woman named Jackie Harris who was a friend of mine that I'd worked with at Athletes and Artists. And she said, look, I'm getting all these tapes. I can't sign any more people. Come to my office, take a look at whoever you want. And maybe you can sign some of them. And that's how I got some of the first clients. And then soon after, a law school friend of mine, his friend was you probably know the guy, Todd DeBuff. He's still the president of Top Rank Boxing. He called me up out of the blue and said, this guy, Nick Charles, needs a new agent. And, this was 25 years ago. Nick Charles was a big name at CNN. So he signed on with me. Another friend of mine was in Hawaii at a bar.
Wait, Steve, I got to interrupt you. Nick Charles, right? Nick Charles and at CNN, the sportscaster there. I mean, that was kind of groundbreaking when he would come on and give the scores, right?
Yeah, he and Fred Hickman in 1980 were the biggest thing going. And then, so anyway, a friend of mine was at a bar at the Pro Bowl and ran into Jackie Slater. He became a client. So it was all like very luckily word of mouth. And like anything else, Wayne, if you stick with something and you're persistent, eventually you'll be able to build a business out of it. And I was lucky. I didn't have a family at the time. I wasn't married. I didn't have a lot of expenses. So I was able to really, kind of take the long-term view.
And originally, I guess you then changed the name of the company to If Management a little bit later in the history of the business.
No. Day one,
Right.
It was called If Management, and I named it after this poem that I always liked by Rudyard Kipling, part of which hangs over Wimbledon. If you can meet with triumph or disaster, or treat those two impostors just the same. And that was a poem that my sister introduced me to when she went on an outward bound trip when she was in high school. And I just thought this is a really great kind of metaphor for how to live a great life.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. And so, then, If Management, you decided to partner with Sandy Montag at the Montag Group. How did you and Sandy come together in that?
So I when I first started in the business, I got to know Sandy. He was, a legendary figure even back in the early 90s. And, it's funny, he always seemed like he was 20 years older than me. And I would see him at events, and then eventually we became friendly, and he's just literally 3 years older than me. And over the years, there were a couple of times where when he was at IMG, they wanted to buy If Management, and we never could come to terms on a deal. But then when he left IMG and when after they got bought by WME, he called me up one day. He said, look, I know we've kicked the tires on you a lot. This time I'm going to go do my own thing, and I'd love for you to come and join me. And that was it. Like, he's a great guy. He's a legendary figure. He's, to me, the best agent that's ever existed in the broadcast sports television space. And so we shook hands on it about 4.5 years ago, and that was it.
And so, that must have been really exciting. I mean, bringing together the two of you into the world of working with all these incredible sports broadcasters and just all the different casters that you work with. I mean, what was the maybe share with our audience some of the people that you work with today.
So the agency together, collectively with Sandy, now we have Maury Gosfin as our third partner. We probably represent about 300 clients throughout the broadcast space. The biggest names you would know about would be like Scott Van Pelt and Mike Tirico, Jim Nance, James Brown. And then, we have a lot of up and coming emerging talent. When I say emerging talent, I'm sort of joking when I say this, but like Brian Anderson, who's kind of gotten to that next level at Turner, or Dan Schulman, Seth Greenberg at ESPN. And then, even we have some of the best, I think, 20 somethings, early 30s sportscasters, because that was always that was always in our DNA. We were the guys, Gideon, myself, Carol Perry, and the old IF crew. We were the people that were loving going to that, like the equivalent of the Cape Cod League, you know what I mean? And looking and standing on the sidelines and scouting that young sportscaster and really saying, who's going to be the next great thing here? And so when Sandy, he came in with the very top level clients, we had this farm system and the continued emergence of being able to do that. So that's really, I think, why it made and still makes a lot of sense for us to be together.
Well, it's really amazing. I mean, you really can't turn on a sporting event today and not see one of your clients on the screen calling that game, and it's amazing. Whether that's on Fox, on ESPN, on ABC, ESPN. I mean, it's really amazing. So again, it's such an honor to have you on our 76 Capital Leadership Series, and as I said earlier, Steve is not only just a talent agent and president of the Montag Group, but he's also author of Don't Take Yes for an Answer, Using Authority, Warmth, Energy to Get Exceptional Results. And I'd love to get into the book a little bit, because there's some just incredible stories. And as you did say, I have read it, and I have a bunch of notes and all the different pages and things that I've looked at. I mean, I just thought that, just in general, first of all, congratulations on writing the book. I know how hard it is. What was your process to get it done, and what kind of inspired you to go do it in the first place?
So first of all, thank you very much for reading it. Thanks for your interest. I would say that this all kind of happened by it was a weird, happenstance. I was looking back at my notes. I keep a lot of notes in my life, and I was looking at all these notes I keep, and I had notes on this book going back 20 years ago, literally 20 years ago, maybe even 25. I just, what happened, Wayne, is when you're a talent agent, you sort of see, like, you have this, like, almost like a front row seat, or a test tube, if you will, of who becomes successful and who doesn't, And if you look back on your college life and some of the people that made it, that didn't make it, if you kind of really thought through it, why did Wayne Kimmel become successful and Peter Raskin? But why some other guys that maybe worked hard, did the right things, why didn't they achieve that same level of success that you have? And I was able to watch this in real time over 25 years and see people really thrive. And so when I turned 50, I'm 54 now. When I turned 54 and a half years ago, in July of 2016, I sort of had, I don't want to call it again a midlife crisis, but I had, just this thought, like, I don't want to just do this the rest of my life, be a talent agent. There's got to be something else I can add to the world. And I thought, well, if I've been able to coach broadcasters and on and off air talent to become more successful, why can't some of those insights be applicable for a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, a teacher, anybody who's got to deal with other people, which is all of us? And so I started to teach this, believe it or not, without book. I just started teaching it. And then one of the banks that I had been working for asked me, this woman got up at one of these events at Bank Leumi, and she said, I'd love for you to, can I buy 2 copies of your book? And I said, well, I don't have a book. And then I went home, told my wife, and then, believe it or not, Wayne, I got an agent. I got a literary agent, and the agent sold this book to HarperCollins. So that was kind of the process.
It is amazing, once you have a book, right? I mean, it's incredible. All of a sudden people want to listen to you for some reason, right?
Right.
No,
So
it's really incredible, and it's one of those things that I think that I'm so happy that that I took the time to go do it and kind of put down the thoughts and things that are trying. And again, it's so great to be able to try to put down those thoughts that have helped you, but then be able to help others. And that's what I've really took away from your book. I think it's amazing. And just on page 73 of the book, you have your first cheat sheet, which is, you call it, where you talk about authority, and you have kind of all these great points about having an authoritative voice, authoritative body language, authoritative presence. I mean, these are all things that a lot of people just don't think about, but you need to do these things if you are truly going to be successful in life and business or whatever you're going to go do in sports or anything, right? And you break it down so simply, and I think it's part of all that. I thought there was an interesting, you talk about how, and then you take that and then you talk about like Tom Coughlin. Mm-hmm. And I love the stories about Tom Coughlin. Maybe you can share some things about Tom as when he was the coach of the Giants, how he started as this authoritarian, but then when he started to really think about things, how things changed.
Yeah, I think Tom Coughlin is as good of an example as you can get of a person who somebody might look at my book and say, well, wait a minute, I don't need to read this because I'm already successful. And my answer to that person is, okay, fine, don't read it if you don't want to, but don't kid yourself to think that just because you're successful, and this includes me, by the way, that doesn't mean there's something you can't improve upon. And so Tom Coughlin had a very successful career as a football coach when he was with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and then to some extent with the Giants, but he wasn't achieving his potential. And what happened is the Giants said to him, look, you're just kind of a jerk, frankly, like you're too authoritative. And one thing that I talk about in this book, as you know, is authoritative devolving into authoritarianism is not a good thing. I mean, you might still get people to work for you or be part of your team or your military unit, whatever it is, if you're authoritarian, but you're not going to win the hearts and minds of people by being an authoritarian. And I think in this day and age, especially, if you can combine that authoritative nature that you might have naturally and the warmth that we talk about in the book also, the love, the connection, the demonstration to another person you care about them and you're vested in their success, then that authority actually goes even higher, in my opinion. And so when I talk to Coach Coughlin, believe it or not, Wayne, I don't know him well. Sandy has been his agent for a long time, and he was kind enough to set up that interview. And when I spoke to him, he got mad at me. He started getting angry with me on the phone call originally because I challenged some of the things about him. But then after we spoke for a while, and I think he kind of understood that I wasn't trying to do anything negative with him, and I really wanted him to tell a positive story of his life. He kind of said to me, you know what, Steve, I actually agree with you. It's kind of funny. He said, I agree with your point. It's actually a good point. And the thing that happened with Coach Coughlin, it's an amazing thing, is that when the Giants came to him and said, Coach, we need you to change your ways a little bit, Charles Way, who was the head of community relations for the team, he just said, Coach, you're not a jerk. You're a good guy. I see the way you are. You're just almost like pretending not to be a great guy and a loving person. But I know how you are with your children and your grandchildren. Coach, just show a little bit of that to the team. Show them that side of you. Nothing bad will happen. And he did that. The very next day, he brought his grandchildren to practice. And after practice, he was rolling around in the grass with them, and they were like stunned. But once they saw this loving man, they all fell in love with him. And the very same team that went 8-8 the year before and lost their best player, Tiki Barber, who retired, that team won the Super Bowl. So it shows you the power of the authority combined with the warmth.
Really incredible stories. I mean, he was as you talk about in the book, he was telling the players what kind of socks they need to wear, right?
Exactly.
He was really tough for a while. I mean, then you talk about another really interesting part of the book, and back, and you talk about Holly Rowe and your relationship there, and what's so interesting was you talk about how her vulnerability was actually a strength. What do you mean by that?
Well, look, I have a theory in life, and I feel like you can relate to this because I know you a bit. is that I don't feel like you put on any airs. Like, you're a very successful guy, but every time I'm with you or in a meeting or even on the Zoom, you're just kind of very open about who you are. You're not, there's no kind of pretenses, right? Look, we're all vulnerable people. We're all mortals. We're all going to die someday. We're all afraid of getting sick. We're all afraid of, God forbid, something happened to our children, our parents, our spouses, or anybody. So we all got the exact same vulnerabilities, all of us, every single one of us, including Michael Jordan and LeBron James on down to you and me, right? And so I think pretending otherwise is a joke. It's a joke because people can see through it anyway. So to me, Holly Rowe showed incredible bravery and courage and strength in the ability to go on air and be open about her medical diagnosis, the cancer that she had, and to be able to cry on TV is something that we can all relate to. Like, we've all cried in our lives. And for those of us who haven't lately, we probably should more. And she did it in such a real human way that I think people saw through her vulnerability and saw it as an immense sense of strength and authority for her.
And just in being able to do that and being someone on ESPN and being, so public was absolutely incredible. I mean, and look, I mean, you talk about something else I think is a really interesting thing in the book. And again, we're here with Steve Hurst. He's an author. He's a talent agent. He's the president of the Montag Group and the author of Don't Take Yes for an Answer. I just love this. Don't Take Yes for an Answer. It makes you think. It really, really makes you think a lot. It's a great title. And you talk about practicing. And it's one of the things that we talk about all the time where we, whether it's with entrepreneurs we invest in, whether it's when we talk with different athletes who are now thinking about what's next in their career. And I say to them, you're not going to get really good in business as an athlete just because you now want to be good in business. Remember when you played sports, you worked out, you practiced so many times to get there. But, you talk about that from a business sense and from a sense of and how to just sort of get yourself to that point. Love to hear some more of your thoughts around practice.
Yeah. So look, if you read the book and you understand that there's such a small correlation and small causal relationship between your technical skills, whether you're a doctor, lawyer, dentist, entrepreneur like yourself, you are going to be competing against other people that are good enough in those technical skills. And what happens in life is that very few people put any attention to these kind of quote unquote soft skills, EQ kind of thing, right? So what I try to do is deconstruct that in a very simple way for anyone to understand it. And that's where the authority, warmth, energy comes in. Because think about it, Wayne. Let's say you're going to invest in a business, right? And you're going to put in $1 million or 10 million, whatever it is. In all likelihood, there's going to be another private equity firm that's similar to yours that's also going to be willing to put in 5 million or 10 million. So the deal terms are going to be very similar. And they're going to go with 76 Capital because either they like Wayne Kimmel or they trust Wayne Kimmel or you energize them. And if I'm your competitor in that particular deal and they don't like or trust you and they like or trust me, they take my 10 million, right? So my belief is that we all get commoditized at some point in life, right, in our fields. So the idea is, how do you practice coming across in an authoritative way? How does somebody take you seriously, Wayne, and know that you're competent enough that if I take your 10 million to be an investor in my business, how are you going to help accelerate me to go from 50,000 in sales to 500,000? And if you've done that 5 other times before and you communicate it with authority and you lay out that roadmap and you do it with your presence and your voice is strong and you believe yourself, then I'm going to believe you, right? So that element is really important, authority. And the warmth is important because if I don't trust you and I don't really believe that you have my best interests at heart, I'm not going to want to do the deal with you. And look, these are really important things. We don't learn them in school. So my thing in this book, and obviously you've read it, is that anybody can read this book. Anybody, and anybody can practice with your wife, with your friend, with your coworker. All of these things are improvable in front of a mirror or just at a fun lunch with somebody.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, and I think one of the other really great stories and takeaways that at least for me within the book was when you talk about your conversations with Chris Mad Dog Russo. from the fan, and just and such a character. And you have him, in your section, pages 136, 137, and around there, the voice. You talk about his voice, and you could tell his passion, I think, is something that is just, it's palpable, right? And even though it's on the radio, or it's amazing to feel it. And I just love the fact that we're really fortunate. He and Brent Musburger at our portfolio company, VEASAN, the Sports Betting Network, they do each week. They do some picks together, and get to hear them on both their stations, which is a lot of fun. So just love to hear more about what you think about Chris, and just his passion and energy, which just is incredible how he draws people in.
It's a great point. And I think for me, what's so special about Chris Russo is it's not just his energy, it's his modulation of his energy. And I think that one of the terms that I've used over the years is this idea about inflection is infection. When you inflect with your voice, you infect the listener with that energy and passion that you have, right? Because sometimes, this, you'll meet a guy like a Chris Russo who's so energetic, but they don't modulate it, and they can bowl you over, and you just don't want to be around them. But Chris has this really magical way of inflecting. And so he'll go crazy, like, Wayne, what are you talking about here? No way the Mets are going to win the World Series this year. But then he'll go really low, and he'll lay out for a second. And that ability to kind of take you almost on a journey and really go high, low, slow, fast, that's what really sucks you in. And also one thing about Chris, and him, and I know him too, is that this is all real. I mean, this is a guy who could have a conversation with you about who was a better basketball player, George McGinnis or Julius Erving, and easily talk about it for 30 minutes. And he could just be having as good a time as anybody in the world having that conversation and getting into the granularity of it. And that, true curiosity and interest, I think, belies his passion.
And you make another really interesting point about him is his memory. You talk about his memory, which I think is really incredible, and something that I think is important in everything that you do, right? If in the memory, and also the memory side of things, is that you actually show other people that you care, right? That you actually remember something about someone else. So, like in business, just knowing where someone went to college, or knowing something. I think you talked about, remembering that you went to someone's son's bar mitzvah or something like that. I mean, just those types of memories and those types of personal touches in business are things that a lot of people just don't think about those things, but they matter so much.
They do. And look, you just hit upon what I think is the most important point of any point that we could possibly talk about. And it's this one word of acknowledgement, right? And I think that at the end of the day, all of us want to be acknowledged in some way, shape, or form. You work hard for your family. You want to come home at night, and your wife, your kids, you just want to be acknowledged for the effort that you put in. And your wife wants to be acknowledged for the efforts that she puts in. And if your child gets a good score on a test, they don't want to hear that you're expected to get that. They just want to feel a sense of acknowledgement, because nobody wants to feel invisible. And the way that we can make other people feel acknowledged, whether it's asking the taxi driver where he's from and then finding a commonality with the place that he's from, or like you said earlier, knowing where somebody went to school, or, like if Chris Russo was interviewing, Mike Piazza, he would know the home run that he hit off of this pitcher, what the count was. That makes people feel acknowledged, that you did it for me today. The fact that you read my book, that you have all these notes on it, I feel very acknowledged by you. And it makes me, frankly, very energized to talk to you about it. And so I think if we can get that basic acknowledgement from other people, then we'll go a step further in how we'll treat them.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's what it's all about, and it's what business is all about. And that's this being able to find a sort of a common ground or connection with somebody. It's amazing what you can do, because, as you know, and like you go into a negotiation and you're negotiating all the time for your clients with some of the biggest media companies out there. And you want them to get paid the most, and they want to pay your client, market, but not all the way up here. Right. And you're going in there and you're everyone's got their guard up and they're ready to go and they're ready to fight. But then all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, we both went to the University of Michigan, or we both went to, in my case, we both went to Maryland, and this and that. And then there's this commonality. Let's talk about the game last night. What do you think about this? And then the guard comes down a little bit, and you could just have a normal conversation. And it's not all about fighting. It's not, you actually can move business forward and do things even better if you can find that common ground.
You said it beautifully. I also would say that we're lucky. I don't know if it's true in your industry as well, but we go back to the same people we're negotiating with over and over again. And if you prove to somebody that you trust them and that they can trust you, then they'll give you a little bit more on the next deal if you give them something on the other deal. And there's not as much posturing, and you sort of see yourselves less as adversaries and more as partners. You're trying to help drive their business forward. They're hopefully helping to drive your business forward, and then everybody can win.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's what it's all about. And I can't forget to at least talk about one of your clients at the Montag group, and is Dick Vitale. I mean, you and Sandy have been working with Dickie V for a long time, and just the fact that he's someone who, again, you can feel it, right? You can just feel his energy, his excitement, his enthusiasm, when you're watching a game, and it makes it even more entertaining. What's it like spending time with someone like that off the air? I mean, is he as excited? I mean, you talked about Chris Russo being as excited sort of in real life than when he's on the air.
Yeah, I mean, look, Dick is very similar to Chris Russo. There's a real, that's really who you are getting. And but Dick was a client of Sandy's for many years, and when I merged in with Montag, like I said, almost 4.5-5 years ago, that's when I really got to know Dick more. But for all these years, he's been the broadcast partner of one of my longest term clients, Dan Schulman. So they've been very close, and I've gotten to know Dick through that as well. I'll tell you something, I don't think I really had an appreciation for Dick Vitale until the pandemic happened. And because maybe you feel the same way. I don't think that it was really as obvious to me how important sports were in our lives until we didn't have them anymore. And I texted something to Dan Schulman last week saying how happy I was that college basketball was back, and how much joy it's brought to my life. Just being a big Michigan fan and just loving the sport. Obviously it hasn't been a good year for Michigan football or the Jets, another team I root for. So when you have something to root for, it just brings a lot of joy into your life. And I think Dick really understands that. Like, I feel like he understood it a lot sooner than most of the others did. He didn't need a pandemic to realize this is not just some diversion in your life. This is something that really makes people happy. And so I think he brings that sense of joy every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and look, Steve, I think it's really interesting. I mean, you can tell how much you love what you do, and the story of Dan Schulman and his career, and that must be so proud to have been with him all these years, and now to see how successful he is on ESPN.
It really is. It does make me proud. But what makes me prouder, actually, if there's one thing I'm really proud of, if one day when it's all over, is that I've had a 25+ relationship with him, with Brian Anderson, with Dave Remsen, with Lionel Bienvenu, and with several others that go back all the way to the beginning. And it's strange to say this, but some of these guys are like my closest friends in the world. And to be able to work with people you have so much respect for, and be able to kind of combine this personal with the business, it's been very, very rewarding and very lucky. A lot of people in whatever business they're in, they can't stand their clients. They can't stand doing business with. They do it because they have to. And I tell you, like, if I ever did something else in my life, I'd still be very good friends with all these people.
Well, it's really interesting because it goes back to the overall philosophy that we have here at 76 Capital. When we think about making investments into entrepreneurs and their companies, we look at that person and we say, is this person really passionate about the business? Are they a smart person? At the same time, are they a nice person? Are they someone that we want to take that phone call? Do we want to be friends with for many, many years? And do they truly have a big vision to truly want to change the world or change the business that they're going into right now? So it's a very similar kind of a thing. And I think one of the things that I wanted to also ask you as we start to wrap up our 76 Capital Leadership interview here with you, Steve. I mean, again, it's been awesome. The stories of you as a talent agent with the Montag Group and in the IF management, being an author of Don't Take Yes for an Answer. I mean, it's again, people need to think about that, right? And think about what that really means, because if you actually sit back and think about that, you'll actually get better just even thinking about the title of your book. And then I really recommend people reading it. But I mean, one of the things I know you care about and we care about at 76 Capital is about making this world a better place. You do a lot of things in the nonprofit side of the world. You do things, you take time to volunteer and try to help others. Why do you do those things, and what are some of the sort of reasons from your perspective is why you believe it's so important to help others?
I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think you probably agree with this. We're really lucky. We're lucky, in my view. Like, I'm healthy. I think that, like, I was born to smart parents who are successful. I think I have a reasonably good IQ level that I have nothing to do with. I could have been born with an IQ 10 points lower or 20 points lower. I have nothing to do with that. That's just all just pure dumb luck. And I think that I feel very grateful for that. And, you got to have humility about some of the things that you didn't control in this world that you came in with. And a lot of people aren't as lucky. And so also, I feel like there are things that I can offer the world that can make it better. I mean, I haven't done it in a long time, but for a while I was teaching in prison at Rikers Island, and just some of these life skills, and some of it's part of what I'm talking about in the book. And you see these kids that really are smart and they have potential, but for whatever reason, they weren't born the way I was, and they made some of the bad choices that I didn't, and some of the laws that they were in jail for several years ago, they wouldn't even be in jail for anymore, drug possession or whatever. But you try to give people a chance to have skills that they could soar with, and instead of kind of languishing, and that's what motivates me.
Absolutely. And before we wrap up, I have to ask you, the sports broadcasting industry and overall sports in general are changing as we speak, right? You say laws are changing, so things like sports betting, which you couldn't talk about on the air prior to PASPA being overturned in May of 2018, to the world of where we have esports today, right? Where there's, literally video, broadcasting kids playing video games against each other. How has that changed your side of the business from a broadcaster perspective? I mean, and actually working with the talent, are you seeing new types of talent coming into the industry that know esports, that are not only really good at, broadcasting games from a traditional sense, but now understand the numbers and the betting side of things?
Yeah, we are. We're definitely. We signed our first esports personality last year, and he's doing very well. On the sports betting side, look, I think it's just the first inning, so to speak, of sports gambling. I think we're going to see a lot more of it. I have a very good friend who lives in New Jersey, who is a math kind of a quant guy. He works on Wall Street. And he's really kind of educated me as to some of the in-game betting opportunities, because, it's legal in Jersey, but not here in New York. And look, I think it's fun. There are people that are going to get carried away with it, and I hope they don't. And I hope they create some limits for certain people, because you don't want to see people, do things that are going to be to their own detriment. But for a guy like me, if I'm watching a game and I could put $20, $30, $50 on it and really enjoy, like, the fourth quarter of that Cleveland game the other day, that to me is so much fun, and it brings joy. And if you're doing it with friends and you're betting against people or with people, that's a sense of community that brings people together, which is all what's great about sports in the first place. So I think it's going to be really fun, and it's going to get a lot more engagement. So I think you've been really on the front end of something that's going to be much bigger in the next 5 to 10 years.
I appreciate that. I mean, we agree. I mean, you look at this, and you had in October of this year, so October 2020, over $3 billion was bet in the 25 states plus Puerto Rico and DC that's now legal to bet in the US. I mean, so that's a really big number, considering the fact that in Nevada, we only had $5 billion bet legally for the whole year. That was basically the the cap of where things were just for the whole year. So now there's a lot of money that's being bet across the country. It's being bet in a regulated way. So as you said, it'll make sure that things are safe and on the up and up, and people aren't going crazy. But I think those are these really interesting opportunities. And I believe in the future, broadcasts will look different. Could you ever believe that you could go on to ESPN and see, the ticker on the bottom that has odds on it? You go to back in the day, now Brent and everybody at VSiN, we talk about the lines obviously every day and on all of our shows. But when he was on the NFL Today with Jimmy the Greek, it was just check marks next to the defense, check marks next to the offense, the quarterback, and it was not really really talking about the odds.
But Wayne, I don't know. You're a little younger than me. Like I said, I'm 54. Even as a 10-year-old kid back in 1976, I could tell you that was my favorite segment of the NFL Today. And I could talk to any friend my age, and they will tell you they remember one of the check marks was intangibles. We didn't even know what that meant, but we learned about it because that's what Jimmy the Greek thought was important, intangibles. And the team that got that check mark almost always ended up being the one to win.
It's incredible, and it's really something that I'm, feel so lucky and fortunate to be able to be working with Brent now, and talking, and we talk about some of those old stories and the old pictures that come up, and Brent's nephew Brian is the CEO of VSiN, and he tells some incredible stories about how he first learned about sports betting and how Jimmy the Greek gave him some money when he first was as a kid, and how that changed his life and how that gave him kind of his view on this industry. And it's an exciting time, and it's an exciting time not only just from the betting side of it, but from the opportunity to actually innovate and kind of make sports even better. I mean, we all love sports so much, but imagine, now with technology and data and analytics and really making the sport and the industry better, smarter, more interesting than ever. And that's what's happening right now. And certainly this pandemic has sped things up from a technology perspective, because unfortunately you've got, I want to ask you this question, Steve. I mean, have some of your clients now had to broadcast games, not in the arena, and what's that like? And how does that play out? Or even if they have to go in the arena from a COVID perspective, I mean, there must be a lot of things to think about.
Yeah, no, that's been a challenge. Look, some of the clients, it's funny, depending on where you are in your life, some of them really don't like the idea of calling the game off the monitor at home because they want to be at the event. But, for others who sometimes maybe do 100 events a year for ESPN and they're living out of a suitcase and they've got 2 kids at home, that's very challenging. So if they maybe do 50 games out of a studio in their basement and only go to 50 games, that it would improve their quality of life quite a bit. So it's definitely an interesting thing. I don't know where we'll end up on this. We had somebody on our company Zoom, an ESPN play-by-play personality, last week who said that they didn't think that we were going to go back to a lot of the games being, where the announcers are going to go on site. So we'll see how that plays out. It's going to be interesting.
Well, it's certainly going to be interesting, and your book is certainly interesting. So we're really excited to have you on our show again. Steve, thank you so much for joining. It's been great having Steve on our show. Again, don't take yes for an answer. Great book by Steve Herz, also the president of the Montag Group. Thank you so much for coming on. Follow Steve at Steven Herz on Twitter. And you can catch all of our episodes on 76 Capital across all of our social media networks, on YouTube, on our podcast as well. Anywhere you find podcasts, you can find our shows. Again, Steve, thanks so much for joining us. And please, I hope you and your family stay safe and are healthy through the holidays.
Thank you, Wayne. Same, right back at you. Really appreciate it.